Hello, everybody. Hope you're keeping well. Let's just give 10 seconds for most of the people to log in, and we'll be starting. Well, I'm back. That was a short one. First of all, welcome, everybody. We're pretty excited to be hosting our first post-COVID webinar from home. As you can see, both Phil and I are doing this webinar from our homes, which is also a first one for us. And we must say and recognize that it is quite a challenging time for many of our customers. We do hope you're keeping safe and well. And I am sure you should know by now that you are our first priority. We really do care about you. So it's really important to be having this conversation now and really hoping that all is well with you. Now, through these hard times, we also have seen how our customers have grown as organizations and as individuals, because it's through these challenging times that we get to learn, grow, and also see some things that we hadn't before. So we have seen how many of our customers have undergone a digital transformation that hadn't happened before and probably wouldn't have happened if something like this wouldn't have triggered it. We have seen that our customers have realized the importance of staying connected and informing their staff of things that are going on um, things that matter. So it's really important to be aware that it's a good time to be thinking about our employees, a good time to be thinking about better ways of reaching out to them and seeing what is the best way of doing this. So I think this webinar, which is called 10 Years of Communication Best Practice in 1 hour, hopefully we'll be able to fit it in, is quite relevant at this point in time. So just before we start, I think it's probably important to go through some housekeeping guidelines so you know what's going to be happening and when. And basically, this session will be recorded and shared with you later alongside the presentation. Everyone will be placed on mute for the duration of the webinar, but please feel free to ask questions on the chat box in your webinar box, and you either Beth or Sydney will be responding to them. They're our moderators, uh, but also and interrupting us when appropriate. You can also expect a Q&A session by the end, and hopefully we'll be able to fit in those questions. Now, I'm pretty happy and excited to be co-hosting this webinar with Philip. He's my colleague, and he's been 7 years working for Snapcoms, now as a general manager. And it's a pleasure because he's actually had quite a few, he's actually spoken in quite a few conferences about internal comms, employee engagement, and even some psychology there. So he does know what he's talking about, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce him. So that's Phil Nunn.
Thanks, Carlos. I don't know if I can quite live up to that reputation, and I'm not sure I do know whether I know what I'm talking about. But anyway, we'll pretend. So yeah, thanks, Carlos, and yeah, it's great to be with you too. So Carlos is a journalist and communicator by trade. He's been in the internal communication space for just over 6 years, and he works pretty closely with various global organizations to make sure that they achieve success through their communication. And we thought we'd try and make this a little bit more entertaining. So we're going to alternate through the slide deck in terms of presentation. And whilst we're both based here in New Zealand, obviously if you hear someone with a British accent, that's me, Phil. And Carlos has got quite a strong Latin American accent, so I think you'll recognize him when he speaks. So with that, back across to you, Carlos.
Perfect. And we also have Beth White and Sydney joining us as moderators. They will be helping with the questions, and they'll be happy to help throughout the webinar. So if you want to say hi, Beth and Sydney.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Perfect. So we will be going through the agenda, so you're aware of what's happening as well. So first of all, we're going to be looking at the struggles communicators face every day. We're going to be focusing on the 5 struggles that customers have actually shared with us, and that we've seen along our 10-year journey. Now, we also want to look at to see if we actually need a radical solution to solve these issues, or what can be done to improve our communication. After this, we will be looking at the COM spectrum, which is this framework that we've been developing for some time now, where we really want to rethink the way we actually classify our communication and how we put it in our channels. So hopefully this will be quite insightful. And we will be following this by having a live demo showing you some of our very exciting use cases and a Q&A session at the end. So Phil, up to you.
Okay, I guess before we start, it's just to recap on who's on this webinar. So we've got attendees from some pretty diverse and rich backgrounds, and I guess that's representative of the way Snapcomms sells in terms of the industries that we sell into. So just scanning through, just so we're all aware, we've got representatives from healthcare, finance, legal, energy, some retail people, tourism, some manufacturing, I think, and I guess lots more. So as I say, that's pretty representative of our customer base. But not only do we have diverse industries, we've also got pretty different or many different roles represented here. So we can see that a good chunk are from IT, so people from the systems, help desk and operations side of things, a whole bunch of attendees from the internal communication space. We've got some HR and marketing. And so again, a pretty varied group, I guess, as we'd expect. And hopefully we can see some of us represented within this image here. But coming from those diverse roles, we've all got different messages that we want to share across an organization. And I guess you can identify some use cases that you see here. But for example, if you're in the operations side of things, you might be looking to inform staff around process changes. I guess a lot of that's been happening at the moment with working from home and so on. If you're in HR, you're looking to canvass some employee opinions, upskilling staff on cybersecurity, for example, or perhaps trying to communicate some system outage notifications if you're in IT. So you're definitely going to see some of those use cases. But despite us all having various different messaging needs, we all want to communicate and get our message across effectively. That's our common goal. So hopefully we can see those things that we have in common, and we're going to try and focus those across this webinar. Excuse me. So what are the 5 challenges? So Carlos mentioned this right up front on the agenda. So I guess we're always talking to our customers, but last year we conducted some quite specific research to 75 of our customers, and these are the top 5 obstacles that our customers identified. And I guess there's no surprises here, certainly for number 1, communication overload. So just having too much communication, it's too high. The second one here is around governance. And achieving a structured governance program is not that easy for most of us. So we're talking here about when you send messages, how many messages you send, by which channels do you send them, the frequency, etc., etc. So that's something that our customer base finds different. We also see that it can be hard to reach some employees. So I guess your remote workers, field workers, people who are just not in front of a desk for the majority of their day. I guess we've also now got the added complication that a bunch of us are working from home or have been. That's certainly something that we see. Not necessarily having the right tools to reach employees in the context in which they wish to be reached. So that could be a budgetary problem. That could be, again, really related to governance and how tools are being used. And I think the one that really brings home for most people here is, just simply being time poor. So we don't have the time to craft messages that are compelling. And I don't particularly want to single anyone out here, but this is something that we heard pretty loud and clear from our customers that are based in the IT space. Now, on the right-hand side of the slide, we also looked at various reports in the industry, but this particular one is a state of the sector report produced by Gatehouse, and it had sponsors from a lot of the major internal communications organizations around the world. And they surveyed a whole bunch of companies, and they could see that they had actually common challenges. So they saw volume of communication being too high, hard to reach employees, and internal technology not fit for purpose. So we can see similarities in terms of what our customers tell us, as well as what an independent wider reporting reports tell us what they see within their customer base. And I don't think we'll have time to tackle all of these in this webinar, but hopefully we can focus some of those key points to help address these areas. Now, before we do that, we do want this to be as interactive as we can. So we want to hear from you if you agree with these issues, that our customers in the world face, or if you've got other priorities. So Carlos has just popped up a quick poll here. And so please take a look through the poll, and if you can select any and all of those that apply in terms of the main challenges that you face when you're communicating with staff within your organization, and we'll let that run for a little period, and then we'll feedback those results. And if you do have other challenges that you feel are not adequately represented within the poll here, then please feel free to share those in the chat, and we can hopefully try and pick these up. So let's just keep that running for a little while, and then we'll see what those results are.
We're still getting plenty of responses, so we'll give a few more seconds.
Okay.
You just need to click on the answer that best describes your reply. Oops, I want to close it, but more keep coming. Let's leave you answer them. Okay, I'm going to close it now.
Okay, so it's pretty interesting. And yeah, oh, there you go, perfect. Thanks, Carlos. So I guess it's probably not too surprising that we see that volume of communication being too high, so this real problem around communication overload, as well as reaching staff appropriately. And I think, I guess that's been exacerbated or amplified by the challenges that where a lot of companies are facing around the world in terms of where their employees are located. So good, that's really interesting. That's a really interesting feedback. I was just going to see if there's anything in the chat, and I don't think there was. So that's all good.
Actually, Rachel just mentioned that no one reads, so readership problems.
Okay. Well, hopefully we can start to try and address some of these as we go through this presentation. So let's keep going. So if you can go to the next slide, Carlos. So from what we've seen, I guess all these factors, but especially those around, well, communication overload, as we've just seen highlighted in the poll, leads to this, what we've termed this fear of sending out. And we're going to call that FOSO. So we're kind of going on the bandwagon here, and everyone has heard of FOMO. So you've got fear of missing out. We've termed this as a fear of sending out. And we can see that, you know, FOSO is justified when you look at some of the stats that we see in the marketplace. So we can see that, you know, that we have overloaded channels. So 30% of every workday is compromised by information overload. And just so you're aware, these statistics are taken from a couple of reports, but there's a bunch of them around. You can find these, but these specific ones were taken from Towers Watson report and the ROI communication benchmark report. But we see overwhelmed employees. So employees, your average employee receives around 122 emails per day. And what this means is that as humans, we basically self-select things that we want to engage with. So messaging just gets overlooked because we don't have the time or the capacity, or frankly, the inclination to engage with all of these things that we see kind of bombarding us on a daily basis. So it's estimated that 50% of all those internal communications are unread. So we've all got challenges that we really want to try and address, but we feel that FOSO really prevents us from reaching our full communication potential. But the good news is that we can work on this, and we can dramatically improve the situation for ourselves and for our teams. But just before we go ahead, I just wanted to, I think it's a good point for us to pause and just see if there's any questions from the audience. Beth, is there anything, or Sydney, is there anything that's come through as yet?
Yeah, I have one question that came through. The questioner asked, up until recently, we used SnapComms exclusively for system outages and IT security announcements. With COVID-19, we have started to expand the usage, and departments like marketing and HR are interested in using the tool more often. How can we include them while making sure we don't overshare with staff?
That's a great question, and it's one that I think we've seen pretty frequently across our customer bases. Again, unfortunately related to the current climate that we're in, we're finding that people know that SnapComms is a great tool to get that cut-through communications, but they're looking to extend that across other functions of the business, for example, but still maintaining that kind of priority channel. So really there's two things that I suppose we should cover there, one of which I think we'll cover through the as we get further into this presentation. So I might just defer that part of the question. That's really about, you know, how do we govern our messages so that we still maintain that priority style of messaging that SnapComms gives you. And there are things that we can do there in terms of making sure that messages from certain functions always look the same way, they appear in a certain manner, they've got the same color, the same iconography, and so on and so forth. So being able to differentiate messages from within SnapComms is really a governance side of things. But then there's also the operational side of things, which is, you know, okay, now we've got these extra people that are doing things with SnapComms. How do we segregate their ability to target certain groups, target certain things within SnapComms, certain channels, etc. So that we've got a lot of granularity built into the product to be able to help us see that utilization across an organization. So I think that's the two sides to that question, but in the first one, I think we'll just get into a bit more as we continue through the presentation. So hopefully that reasonably answers the question, and I guess with that, I'll go back to Carlos.
Perfect. And I guess before we start, I'm showing you an unlikely comparison. Probably many of you don't even know what I'm showing here on the screen, and it's actually called a Shakti mat. I didn't have a clue when I got this. I found it quite odd, to be completely honest. And I guess for you to know, I do practice yoga, and a fellow yogi at the studio said, "Hey, you should try this." And he gave me this really, really weird mat that has thousands and thousands of little plastic spikes. Now, it could look painful, but surprisingly, it isn't. It's actually, what happens here is that we have so many little points across the mat that it actually is spreading the load over all of these points, and it makes it not only bearable, but actually quite enjoyable. And why am I talking about this, and what relationship does this have with communication? Well, basically, I'm trying to use this concept where if we have one little point with lots of pressure on it, the force can be overpowering. It can be quite overwhelming. But if you spread that force over multiple points, in this case it's thousands, but when we're talking about communication, it's quite a few channels. We're spreading the pressure over all of these channels, and that actually makes it much more digestible and much easier to consume. So same thing applies to communications channels. If we come to think about it, if we're flooding one channel with multiple messages and multiple subjects, we're creating actually quite a bit of noise. And this dilutes the impact of the channel, which makes it hard to reach employees. So if we come to think of it and adapt it to the channels we use, for example, email. If we're sending email messages about messages from the CEO and IT outages and cultural messages, we're putting all in one inbox. Adding into that, we know that email, our staff are using email to reply to customers, to speak with providers, to have conversations with peers, sometimes even friends and family. And on top of that, quite a few other things. You have sales and mails and spam. So it's quite a crowded and busy message. And the pressure on that channel particularly can be quite overwhelming, and dilute the impact and lead to fatigue if managed incorrectly. Now, if on the other hand, we have multiple channels and we spread this load over these channels, we're basically decreasing the tension by spreading it across the different channels. So it can become a much more digestible, amount of content that we can consume on different channels. So what we're trying to say is that diversifying the messages sent through different channels actually improves everything. And that is not to say many of you have SnapComms with 1 or 2 channels and you're using it only for priority messages. That's great. You can be quite effective and achieve high readership rates with one channel, but it's just about being aware of the amount of content that is being sent through this one channel. Now, to make this more understandable, we'd love to introduce the comms spectrum, which is basically a framework that looks at the messages we send and considers the characteristics of each channel to truly understand which of these is appropriate for what kind of communication, and for us to be able to spread all of these needs that we have. So if you look at what we have here on the slide, we can see that probably many of us can relate to some of the use cases or communication needs that we have. we do have lots of customers that use SnapComms for emergency communications. Let's hope it doesn't happen, but if there's a fire in the building or they need to take cover, also for health and safety. For example, right now with COVID, many of our customers actually created messages to let people know if there was a COVID positive test in the office or in the plant. IT and cybersecurity, that's a no-brainer. If there's an outage or a cyber attack, sorry, underway, it's really useful to let people know so that they can act based on upon that. Business operations with changes in uh, logistics or processes, CEO updates, welcoming new staff. So there's basically quite a few reasons why you want to reach out to staff. We call those use cases. Now, as Philip mentioned, we do come from different backgrounds, so probably we have different reasons to communicate. But regardless, we always have some messages that are more pressing for time and those that are good to know, but probably not that important to interrupt someone just to have this person read this. So we have a continuum that goes basically from critical to social. And not all messages are, have the same relevance. For example, if there's a fire in a building, I want 100% of the people to immediately do something, which is evacuate the building. They have to leave the building. They need to see this communication, and it is a life and death situation. In the opposing side of the spectrum, we have things like celebrations and mental health awareness. And I'm not saying that's not important. Of course, it's something that is nice, but it should be something that is optional to consume. Probably sometime later this week. It's not relevant to consume it right now. And then to stop a sales presentation just because we want to let them know that someone has a birthday. Uh, and it's nice to know. I mean, it's great to create a great culture and atmosphere, but there's a time and place for everything. Now, in between, we have use cases that are not as drastic. For example, we have an unplanned outage. Of course, it is important people know and are aware that something is going on. But, and they should probably know as soon as possible, especially the people that are being affected. But obviously, it's not a fire in the building where they need to run now. And reinforcing the strategy is also something that falls in the middle as a relevant thing. It ideally we do have high readership, but it's something that can be consumed either later today or in the next few days. So we see this continuum that goes from critical to social, like I mentioned, and critical is really good for things that people need to act right now, whereas social is actually something that is great for engaging social, and things to the right of the spectrum are things that are better to drive community behavioral change or support staff engagement. So up until now, can you tell us if there's any questions, Beth and Sydney?
Yes, I have one that just came up. How do I know what channels work well for the different message types I want to share? Is there an easy way to structure messages with the different channels?
Could you repeat the second question, please?
Um, is there an easy way to structure my messages across the different channels? The first part of it was, how do I know which channels work well for the different message types I want to share?
Okay. Thank you very much. And well, I guess we will be covering part of this as we move along. But let me tell you that it's really important to consider the channels we have, and I think that's a great question. First of all, I think it's quite important to have an inventory of the channels you have. Just realize which channels you have available, and probably of you have quite a few. And once we know, and probably many of you do know, it's really important to just have I guess a thought on what are the correct characteristics of these channels. What are um, the things that these channels do very well, and the things that they're probably not as appropriate to communicate using these channels. So basically having the pros and cons of each channel will help us understand which channel can we use in a different part of the spectrum. For example, SnapComms can be really good for quite a few of these, but for example, we might have a PA system that broadcasts something to the whole organization. That's probably just relevant to use if it's something really critical. Whereas, let's say if we have if we want to put posters or things like that, that's something that would probably be less critical and we can put to share social events. Same thing with SnapCom's channels. It's really important to understand how can we use these channels in different ways. Now, once we have this, it's really easy to assign use cases to each of these channels. And there's a really good way of doing it that is called the channel framework. There's lots of research done on this by IABC and many of the, I guess, international internal comms organizations. So this channel framework is basically a way of being able to classify channels in a way that best suits your use cases. So hopefully I did answer the question. If there's still questions around that, just let me know and I'll be happy to answer them as well. Any more questions?
Nope, that's it. We're good.
Okay, perfect.
All right, thanks, Carlos. I'm just going to add as well, there's actually a couple of slides, just a few further on here, which kind of sets out where we see, SnapComms fit in within that spectrum full stop, and then specifically which channels from SnapComms fit across that spectrum. So that's probably something that will help visualize that as well. But anyway, let's keep going. So I want to take a look at some specific use cases that we can see here. And we've kind of plotted them along this spectrum from left to right. But at the same time, I also want to share some tips that we've seen based on the experience that we have within the internal communication space. And hopefully these tips can relate to, where on the spectrum you're communicating and the types of communication that you're looking to send. So the first one here is a critical warning. So this is a fire in the building, and Carlos has talked about this one previously, but really what we're looking for here is something that's instantly recognizable. This isn't something that somebody needs to think about, oh, what do I need to do here? So consistent representation, style, manner, brand. We know that when we see this type of alert, this type of messaging, then we know what we need to be doing. This is a danger problem, life or death situation. So making sure that we see that consistently across these types of critical communications. And I guess that the tip number 2 here kind of sounds obvious, but targeting the right audience. So clearly, if you've got multiple buildings, for example, or this critical alert only applies to a certain section of your employee population, then making sure that we've got the right groups, the right ability to segment and target our audience is really key here, because we certainly don't want to be scaring people with these critical messaging if it's not relevant to them. Now, the second one that I just want to talk about, and we're going to continue as we go across this spectrum here, is one that we see as a priority message. So this is an unplanned outage, I guess, for all of our IT folks joining us here. So what we're seeing here is the ability is using visual cues, so identifiable icons, colors, symbols, for example, so people can recognize this message faster. So think of these as like mental shortcuts. So you don't want your brain to work hard to process the information that's contained within here. So again, using a similar style of iconography, maybe even message tone, location on screen, colors, etc., etc. And we can start to play with colors that help communicate the status of events here. So for example, we can use a stoplight system for when there's an outage. So you get a red message or red icon, for example. As it's being worked on, you can give updates that are amber in color or yellow in color. And then when it's been resolved, you can use green to say, hey, it's all we're back to normal, everything's operational again. So using these cues can really help people become familiar with what's being asked about them. So the next one here is what we'd consider an important message. So this is, in this case, a compliance policy. And really, we're trying to make sure that we make optimum use of things like recurrence. So recurrence can really help to make sure that important things get read and acted upon. And we've got the recurrent spectrum we can set from whether it recurs every couple of minutes to every couple of hours to every couple of days, weeks, etc. And you need to effectively set that based on the importance of the message and really how quickly you want a response to that. So a shorter recurrence basically equals a higher impact and ultimately a faster action. So the next one is one that we consider relevant. So this is something that we do need to pay attention to, and this is a planned outage as opposed to an unplanned outage being a priority. This is a planned outage. We now see this as being relative. And I think the key here is making sure that these types of messages are brief. So, you know, one idea per message. So don't overload your messaging with multiple things that you're trying to communicate. And remember, most of our workforce now is really quite attuned to social media. So Twitter limits the number of characters for a particular reason. So let's start to make sure that these types of communication are really clear, concise, easy to digest, easy to act upon. And just when we talk about acting upon, don't forget, if you've got a call to action, that needs to be really clear and laid out within that message. So in this case, if you're to log out or log in to a particular system or do something, then make sure that that's spelled out loud and clear within that communication. And the other tip here is talking around using design elements and movements to make these types of messaging more appealing. So, you know, little animations, scrolling tickers are really great because they really grab our attention. It kind of taps into what we call our primitive brain. So we're as humans, we're conditioned to see movement. So, you know, when we're looking to get these types of messages across, then let's try and use some of those dynamism within a message. The next one here is one from our engaging piece of the spectrum. So in this case, it's a staff sentiment survey. So how do you rate your day? But it could be HR announcements, could be new staff joining, holiday celebrations, and so on. And the first tip I wanted to share on this particular screen is let's make the most of the screen here. So use different positions, sizes of messages, sizes of assets to start to condition your staff to know that when a message appears in this location of this size, within this color, of this style, it's likely to be something that you're being asked to engage with. So you can start to play around with that and be consistent. So if you know, for example, in this case, we've got a HR type message or an engagement type message, we're putting that on the bottom left of the screen. It's got a certain style, it's got a certain look, it's got a certain size, and you can really start to condition staff. So the point here is the more you condition staff to become familiar with the types of messages that you're sending, the more likely they are to actually act and respond to those messages. And whilst we're talking about conditioning, let's remember that we're actually sending messages to people here. We're humans, and we've got to make it interesting. We've got to make it appealing. So be creative. So use pictures, use imagery, vary your language, tone, and let's make the titles interesting. We see so many messages with a title that says ABC 1, 2, 3. So, you know, would you really want to click on a message that doesn't have something that grabs you immediately? So what's in it for the audience member that you're trying to engage with? Why should they read it? Let's try and put yourselves in your audience shoes. The last one along here is a social style of message, and here I think the important thing is to really have diversity within your communication strategy. So use multiple channels to communicate things like things that you want that we consider to be social, for example. And as I guess as humans, again, we all learn, and we all learn differently. We all absorb things differently. We all like different things. So being able to reinforce a particular message across multiple channels can really help drive that engagement. So rather than just, in this case, it's a celebration, for example, we can use that as a screensaver, lock screen, wallpaper, but we can also, you know, send that as perhaps an alert, for example, with a much lighter recurrence basis and so on, bearing in mind that everybody learns slightly differently. Now, lastly, we do want to stress that it's really important to spread your communications right across that spectrum. So prioritizing messages, you need that cut through by using the highest impact channels. So our emergency, urgent alerts and so on. And the less pressing messages, we want to, you know, for example, that's driving behavioral change or promoting a positive culture. So those long burn, more passive style messaging, we want to leave those to channels that are less obtrusive, but are also highly engaging, and particularly over a longer period of time. And I guess just to finish off this spectrum, we have juxtaposed how our channels actually fit within this spectrum. So kind of relating to the question that Carlos was talking to earlier. So you can start to relate your actual communication needs to a channel that can help you meet them. So we've got things like alerts, tickers, and screensavers typically are on the more left-hand side of the spectrum here. Although alerts are quite interesting because they can actually span across that spectrum depending on the configuration that you have within those desktop alerts. And then we also see things like quizzes, surveys, newsletters, lock screens, and wallpapers being on the right-hand side of the spectrum. Now, obviously, we also know that SnapComms is unlikely to be the only communication that you use within your organization. So what we've tried to do here is kind of plot how we see other communication tools fit in across that spectrum. And I guess this is somewhat subjective, but we've really tried to look at the strengths of those platforms to see where they're best suited. Now, obviously, we feel that SnapComms has got great coverage across the spectrum because we've got that diversity of channels. But I think it's worth considering, or I think it's worth you considering, of the tools and platforms that you have within your organization, just how are they being used? What are the communications you're expecting? And really, does that align to that spectrum? Are you using the right tools for the right messaging, for the right job? And does that actually achieve the outcomes that you really need to get? We know that we have a range of communications across a typical business enterprise with really very different messaging needs. And understanding this communication spectrum has been really essential in us constructing ways in which we can help organizations communicate more effectively. So having a balanced communication landscape that uses multiple means of communicating with staff, depending on the intended outcome, really helps to drive staff engagement. But, well, frankly, this all sounds like a whole lot of work. We know that we're time poor. We know that we struggle with governance. We know employees suffer with communications overload. I guess that was highlighted within that poll as well. So we really wanted to look at ways in which we can really help each of you with your diverse communication needs to effectively communicate with your employee base. So we've introduced this concept of use cases. Now, just want to take you back to what we heard as being your top 5 communication challenges. So communication overload, poor governance, hard to reach employees, customers not having the right tools, and no time to craft messages. Well, our use case templates take that hard work out of creating really great communications. They look fantastic. They're engineered to get, and we've got a whole library of them, and we're going to keep building to them. We're going to keep adding, and they're going to become more and more useful the more that we provide. And with that, I'm going to hand back across to Carlos, and he can take you through some of those.
Perfect, Phil. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go straight into showing you something that you might find familiar. I'm going to go to my content manager. Whoops, I thought I closed this. Quit. Now, as you can see, we embrace using diverse communication platforms here in SnapComms. Now, I'm going to take you to familiar territory. Hopefully, many of you do know your way around our content manager. And as you might expect, we always try to keep on improving things. First of all, please bear with me. I've been told by Phil that I do make funny faces when I'm multitasking and trying to click things. So I hope at least it provides some good laugh rather than than worry. But I'm going to be taking you through some of the latest innovations we have introduced with our use cases. So let me start with this one. In particular, I love this one that you will be seeing pop up in the screen soon, because it's about finding how our staff are. Right now, working from home, many of our staff, many of our people in HR and internal comms don't really have a clue how people are doing in their day. And it's just a really good idea to pop this like at 3 p.m. or at 2 p.m. to see and get a grasp of how our staff are doing this day. So I'll probably reply that I'm doing pretty well. That's one of our first use cases. And like Phil mentioned, we do have quite a big library. We know we have people from different areas of the business, and it's really important to be able to help everybody in different ways that suit them. So what we're doing here is we're taking best practice and making sure that we implement it when we design our templates. For example, that survey to ask people how they're doing in their day, if you notice, it's in the lower left corner, which is really appropriate for HR messages, for social messages, and for things that are not on the light side, but where you don't want to have a complete intrusiveness. Now, you can see here a ticker letting me know of an unplanned outage. Again, I'm using an orange color that denotes some level of importance. It's in the upper right corner, spreading across the screen on top. So it's something that's quite relevant. And I should know that the HR portal is down and it'll be back by 8:30. I can click if I want to find more. And all of these templates have been pre-configured, which is beautiful. You don't really have to waste your time in creating these, like, making them look nice and everything. They actually have a stunning design, and they are following best practice, like I mentioned. So you're probably also familiar with the SnapComs app, and you can see here that we have also some other things. For example, working from home checklist. When people migrated to working from home so fast, many of the IT staff, had to very quickly see how, if they had all the material and all the things that they needed, if they had the monitors, the office chairs, the headsets. Um, so it was really great for us to show this template we created for our customers during this coronavirus crisis for free. So many of you did have access to this one if you had the appropriate content manager. Now, why not try something fun? This is a holiday use case that I want to show you. And it's a bit quirky, as you can imagine, but it's about the holidays. We want to wish people happy holidays. We have very diverse holidays around the world, and we do want to be inclusive with these. So you will see that there's quite a few of these. And not only we have things that are um, on the lighter side, but there's more serious things that we can use SnapComs for. Before we start, now you can probably see the content manager in your screens, and I will start creating content. I do want to stress how quick it is. So you'll probably see me multitasking, creating content here, but you should see as well that it's also something that I can do in a breeze while I'm speaking with you, and probably in less than 2 or 3 minutes. So why don't we say hi to a new employee? Now, I'm going to create a template from scratch. So before I move, when you're creating something, you do have quick filters here. So you can go to your most recent content that you've created. You can go to channels if you want to start from scratch. You might have some content templates already created by yourselves. Or what we're recommending is for you to see what's here on this tab for use cases. So as you can see, many of you probably already have a library with the coronavirus cases if you have the one of the latest apps, but we'll keep on adding more and more. Now, let's start a new employee use case template, and I'm going to be welcoming one of my colleagues. So super easy. I just name it and put create. And what I will be doing now is populating a pre-established form and putting some pictures on it so that it looks nice. So let me drag and drop this picture here. So what I'm doing is just dragging and dropping a picture of my colleague, following the instructions here, and waiting for this to load. Now, as you can see, my colleague's face has appeared here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure every picture fits perfectly in the different displays I have. So we even have for mobile, we even have different types of phones. We can zoom in, zoom out, and just make sure the picture looks great everywhere. And we're really trying to make this simple for you. So instead of you having to think what you need to put in these use cases, you can just copy and paste uh, from the systems you have, or you can type here in the system all the information that you need. So I'm actually introducing Alicia Conroy, who works in the US. She is a customer success manager that works in the global accounts team. So I just want to put the basics here. This is the minimum information that is required. She lives in Georgetown, Delaware, which is great. I'm a bit jealous. She's actually going into summer while we're going into winter here in New Zealand. And we here at SnapComs, we always want to share some personal things when people join the team, because in the end, I guess it's just important to get to know them. We will get to know them professionally, but it's also really good to see what they like and uh, how they are a little bit on their free time. And LinkedIn, I think we all, if not most of us have LinkedIn, so it's actually really good to share so people can find a bit more information. And now you can see that it's actually populated, in a beautiful format that you don't even need to worry about. So all of these kind of preset defaults are already in place with the best practice. So for example, we've seen that 1 week is ideal for you to do these introductions. In those larger organizations with 30, 40, or 50,000 people, what you can do is probably you either publish it directly only to the segment or the teams where these people will be working, just to avoid publishing too much, or you can put it for a shorter time. But we have taken into account all of these best practice. Now, this one's quite simple and fresh and modern, and that's how it's intended to be. Now, I'm going to preview it using our beautiful preview interface. Now, as you can see here, we will be seeing how it displays, and it will be coming in the lower left corner because, like I mentioned before, it's ideal for you to actually share more social or lighter news. And people actually get preconditioned. They get to expect these things in this corner, and they know that if it appears here, it's actually something from HR or something that is more on the fun side. You can share this with your colleagues as well using this green share button here. But I guess it's probably best if I just publish it and you see it in action. So you could see that right now I was doing this while speaking and copying and pasting, but most of our customers have actually reported to be doing these templates in less than 1 or 2 minutes. It is especially important for the people in help desk environments where it's so fast paced, and 1 minute or two does make a difference. So if you have these templates already in place, you can only change the text that is relevant. Um, and you don't need to be thinking about every single thing that you need to put. Sometimes, like for example, when you're introducing someone new, there's a few little things that are important to share, and we've pre-selected those for you. So in this case, I'm showing you this welcome message. As you see, the picture looks great. It would look great in any device, including mobiles and everything. And you can even say hi, because with this template, we have reactions. And it's obviously great if everybody, can add into the conversation and, welcome the new employee. Now, I'll be following up with something probably a little bit more serious. Many of our customers, with working from home and different changes that have been happening in their workforces, have really had a requirement for compliance content. And in this case, I'm going to be showing you a compliance with a mandatory acknowledgement, where you want all people to actually accept or comply with a message. So I'm going to be using my organizational theme, which you can see here. And I'm going to be creating an alert. Now here you can have a naming convention uh, that suits you, but it's also really important. This doesn't appear on the message, but it makes it easier for you to be able to search your content, as you probably know. So I'm creating my compliance content. Something that's really popular, like I mentioned, is new working from home policies. We've been forced to adapt quite quickly to these things. And there's obviously 1,000 other reasons that you might want to share this. We work with lots of companies in the financial sector. And obviously, it's important to be introducing, I guess, money laundering policies or different security policies around operations. So it's really handy to be able to quickly be able to get people accepting policies. Now, you obviously have a report that you can tap into, and you have a digital proof of record of what's been happening. So that makes it really, really robust. Now, here you can see that you do have options. We've tried to limit this in ways that make it easier. And by limit, I mean have a defined structure that suits most of the cases, but we also want to give you the flexibility to be able to adapt the template to suit your needs. So here we have the option to enable it to remind later. I won't fill these buttons because they're already pre-populated with appropriate text, so that I don't even need to worry about that. And voila, I have this template that looks quite beautiful. The only thing is it's probably a large chunk of text, so I can also come and edit it here, and they're 100% editable. So in terms of the text that you're putting. So in this case, I've separated the paragraph a little bit so that it looks a little bit more spaced. It's branded, as you can see, so we're using best practice. And we have one option to comply. So I'll just go ahead and select the target, which will be the whole organization in this case. Select apply. And again, all of the defaults have been pre-populated with the best practice. In this case, for example, direct on screen works very well because it's an important policy and it's already pre-selected for me. So I'm just hitting publish. And there we go. You should see how it appears shortly. Now, all of these templates are structured in libraries so that they're easy to navigate to, and you should have access to these with the different packages. Now, again, we've thought about everything. So if it's a longer text and you need to scroll, you cannot comply until you've read everything. So those little things you don't even need to worry about. And in this case, I will be selecting I comply, and you should have that by when everyone's replied. Now, we are working quite fast to produce many exciting and different use cases. Um, these ones are probably more pertaining to HR, internal communications, or operations, but right now they're quite relevant. We have lots of people working from home, and like I mentioned before, we don't have that close contact. So many of them are working for long hours, and they don't have that interaction where they go to the coffee station and have a chat or something. So it's probably really important and relevant to be telling, to remind them to stretch, to stay hydrated, and see how we're doing to have that more humane communication through technology. So these are pretty exciting and fun, but we also have some that are a little bit more on the left side of the spectrum, more critical, more important. So fire in the building is one of them. So we're again using pretty simple communication, brief, and using symbols that actually people can identify. Now, last but not least, let me share one of these templates that are super easy to create and fun as well. So I'm going to create content here. I'm going to use the use case for, let's say, the stretchy lady. I actually like her. She's stretching. She's making us kind of feel a little bit better in the office. And I'm going to select my company logo. So that's just a random name I'm giving it for now. And it's so easy in this case, like everything's being created for you. I don't even need to think of anything. Especially it's a little bit early. I slept late. So my brain is still waking up. I had one coffee. I need my second coffee. But again, this has already been pre-selected for me. And I just click publish. So it's super easy. Again, in 1 second, I did this that will probably have a positive impact on my employees. So we do have quite a few quite a large variety. For those of you in IT, outages are obviously top of mind. So we do have um, many of those for you, and we will be seeing that pop up. Ah, sorry, I forgot. This is not in my account, so I'm going to be showing you the preview on this one because I probably published it to somebody else in the office. That's what happens when you have a live webinar. So, yep. I mean, it's never a bad time to stretch. So whoever got it probably will be uh, enjoying the fact that they can stretch. It's also a little bit early. So, yep. You can see how it would display here. And again, it looks quite nice and you don't even have to worry about it. So without further ado, let's just continue with our presentation. And back to you, Phil.
Thanks, Carlos. I do wonder who got the stretchy lady. That will be an
Probably the
interesting.
QA team. So it's their account.
Anyway, okay. So look, this is pretty much the last slide here, and I know we're tight on time. So just to reiterate, really, that to say that use cases are included with what we're calling our Inform and Engage packages. Some of you may already be have bought those packages, but I guess this is kind of related to the feedback that we've received, and multi-channel communications just being much more effective than that single point. So we're introducing the and your customer success manager will be in touch, I'm sure, shortly to talk about those packages. But it's effectively a package selection of channels, use cases, functionality, but all really designed to give you better communication success. And I guess with that, I'll hand back across to you, Carlos.
Perfect. So we're almost over, and I did want to thank you. We know, like I mentioned, that it's a complicated time for many of us, but we are here to help. Our customer success managers, Beth and Sydney, are amazing to work with. I work a lot with them, and they're always happy to answer any questions around packages, use cases, or how can you make your communication more effective. We will be sharing these handouts, and hopefully we can guide you through them on a one-on-one basis through our CSMs. And I'm sure you can find the time to have these discussions that are pertinent to you. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that my role is 100% listening to customers and making sure that we act on what we listen. So that's the only thing I do here. And having conversations with you is some of the places where we learn the most. So I'm going to be sending my contact details in the follow-up email. And if you want to have a conversation, if you want to express what you want to see in SnapComms, the features that you like, the ones that you dislike, or anything that can improve your experience, just let me know. But before we move to the last questions, what we want to do is share a little surprise with you and let you vote for the templates that you'd like to see us create. They do come with the packages, but we do want to give you the opinion, uh, I guess the voice for you to choose which ones you like. So if you don't mind voting for the ones that you'd like to see us develop, that would be a great way of seeing what we can start working with, and we have the commitment of working with the most voted option uh, following this. So we've spoken with our product team, and we will be developing the most voted options from this webinar. So please let us know your opinion. Now, if some of the ideas are not here, if you want to put them on the chat, that's great, because we can actually also put them there. And while you continue voting, I'll close this soon. It would be great to open the Q&A session. So Beth and Sydney, are there any questions waiting for us?
Yeah, one of the questions was, are all of the use cases available for me to use, and do they have a cost?
So I'll take that. So we've made some use cases available to everyone. So a good example of that is the coronavirus use cases. So they're fully available to everyone within our organisation. But as I guess I indicated a little while ago, the other use cases are tied to those packages, Inform and Engage. Now, and we're kind of working through the process with our existing customer base on whether organisations already that package applies, for example, just based on the combination of things that that organisation has, or whether we need to look at changing some of those packages and so on. So I guess I'm dodging the question, but the real answer here is it depends, and it depends very much on what you currently have bought from SnapComms. But I think that's something that our customer success team will be talking with each of you individually. If that makes sense.
All right. I did see Sandra said she tried to vote for the wellness templates, but you can't click on that. So I'm not sure if there's something going on with the polling right now.
Sure. Are there any other questions? I see a few coming in right now.
Yeah, there is. Do you have opinions on the use of video in SnapComms from Patrick?
Well, I can go for that one, Phil. To be honest, video can be quite engaging, especially in some of the use cases. So, for example, for a message from the CEO, we actually already have a use case template where that's quite effective because you're seeing the CEO's face. You want to express, you want your employees to have confidence, and being able to see directly into the person who's actually imparting the message makes a big difference. So we've had very, very positive responses, especially for important messages like these, where it's really important to get that across. Other reasons why our customers use video are little training videos and little training things, because some of our staff can be quite visual and they like to learn with either a video or pictures or simple steps. So we do encourage using video when appropriate. It's just really important to see how you will deliver it in the spectrum, how intrusive you will be. Probably like a video from the CEO, you don't need to put a full screen, direct on screen and everything, but you can probably put a reminder in the lower left corner, and in that way it'll be quite effective. Anything you'd
I
like
think
to add,
that's a
Phil?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's a great example of when you'd also really look to optimize your recurrence settings as well. So it is something, I mean, if somebody has taken the time to produce a video, I guess it is something that you anticipate your audience seeing, but it's probably not something that you need to, immediately push right in front of, right in front of their faces. So making optimum use of that recurrence, so people get multiple opportunities to view that video based on a time that is appropriate to them rather than appropriate to you as the sender. And so we find that a combination of video plus recurrence works really well there.
Yes, and I guess we do know that we're pressed for time. We have a few more questions, but most of them have to do if we're going to be sending the slides and if we're going to be sharing the content. Yes, of course, all the slides and the recording of the presentation will be shared. And we also have a few additional materials that can help. So hopefully we will be putting that in a package and sending it to you shortly. So without further ado, I think we can wrap this up. Thank you very
Yeah,
much. We really appreciate your time.
Carlos, it's just worth saying that the poll results, I don't think they popped up on screen. So
Yes. Let
I
me
think
share them.
there you go, perfect.
So with this, what we want, we will be, like I mentioned, actually working on the ones you voted the most throughout the 3 webinars, and you will be seeing these soon. So hopefully the CSMs will keep you posted on this.
Great, thank you.
So thank you very much. We really, really appreciate. And I see that there's lots of interest in cybersecurity and emergency notification templates. Those are and will be considered by our product team. So thank you very much and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.